for their contribution in terms of broadening what we hope was a general interest.
For 25 years, a portrait of Princess Diana lay hidden in the shadows, wrapped up and stored deep within a storage room at Windsor Castle. No one saw it, no one publicly mentioned it, and seemingly no one in the royal family wanted to explain why the image of the woman once loved by the world had disappeared from the very walls where she belonged. But then, in just one evening, everything changed. Prince William had quietly prepared to bring the portrait back into the light. No press releases, no cameras, no warnings sent to Queen Camilla. Just a trusted group of staff, a locked room, and Princess Anne standing there to witness Diana's return to the place she rightfully belonged to more than 2 decades earlier. When Camilla discovered the matter the following morning, she immediately demanded that the painting be taken down. She turned to King Charles III, believing he would intervene as he had done for years. But Charles gave no order. William did not back down, and Anne uttered a short sentence that silenced the entire room. It's worth noting that the hanging of the portrait wasn't the most shocking blow to Camilla. What truly made her realize the power dynamics within the palace had shifted was Charles's reaction and the 5 cold words Anne spoke to her face. Before we delve into what happened behind the Windsor doors, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next developments. And let me know in the comments, where are you following this story from? And to understand why that portrait was hidden for 25 years, we must go back to the time of Princess Diana's death, when the world was mourning her, and inside the palace, her image began to silently disappear. Outside the royal gates, thousands stood silently in the rain. Flowers lay in thick layers on the ground. Cards, letters, and photographs of Diana covered the walkways. Some had never met her, yet they wept, as if they had lost a member of their own family. Diana had become a symbol of compassion, intimacy, and a kind of warmth rarely shown publicly by the royal family. Her image appeared on the front pages of newspapers, on television, and in every conversation. The whole world seemed to want to preserve her memory. But inside the royal residences, a completely different process began. There was no official announcement, no document declaring that Diana had to disappear from those rooms. Everything happened quietly, step by step, small enough that no one could point to a specific moment and say that was when her memory was erased. Diana's personal belongings began to be packed. Items that once sat on table shelves or beside the bed were moved into boxes. Photographs once displayed in prominent areas were gradually relegated to less frequented hallways. One framed picture was moved to another room. Another photograph disappeared from its original place. Then yet another was put away in storage. Each individual change could be explained as a routine rearrangement. But looking back at the whole process, Diana's presence within the royal home had shrunk to the point where it was no longer noticeable. The room she once occupied was reportedly locked. The fresh flowers Diana used to keep in her living space were removed. The smallest, most personal and intimate traces of her life vanished one by one. Among those removed from view was an official portrait. It was no ordinary painting. It was painted during a period when Diana was at the height of her public image. She was known not only for her beauty, but also for her ability to make the underprivileged feel seen, heard, and respected. Those who witnessed Diana seeing the finished portrait recounted that she stood before it for a long time without speaking. Not the silence of disappointment, but the silence of someone suddenly realizing the artist had captured a deeper part of herself than she had anticipated. The portrait was supposed to be displayed in a place of honor, alongside images of women who had left a significant mark on royal history. But Diana never saw that happen. After her death, the painting was wrapped up, removed from the exhibition list, and placed in a storage room at Windsor. There, the face that had graced millions of newspaper pages lay in the shadows, unseen, unexplained, and without a date set for its return. The contrast was almost agonizing. Out there, the world continued to print Diana's image in books, newspapers, commemorative stamps, and mementos. People still recounted how she shook hands with patients, without gloves, how she embraced children, and how she walked through places that other powerful people wouldn't dare go. But within her own family home, Diana's portrait remained hidden deep in the shadows. And the one most pained by this void wasn't the public. It was Diana's 15-year-old son. That boy was Prince William. On September 6, 1997, William was only 15 years old when he walked behind his mother's coffin through the streets of London. Beside him were Prince Harry, Prince Charles, Prince Philip, and Charles Spencer. In front of them was the coffin of Princess Diana. On either side of the street stood a silent sea of people, many weeping, many bowing their heads, and millions of viewers around the world watched every step of a boy who had just lost his mother. William was not allowed to break down. He had to walk steadily. He had to keep his eyes fixed ahead. He had to keep his face almost expressionless, even though each step brought him closer to the moment of his final farewell. But William was not just grieving the loss of his mother. At 15, he was old enough to understand how his parents' marriage had fallen apart. Diana had told him about Camilla's presence in her marriage to Prince Charles. William understood that behind the family photos, the formal ceremonies, and the public smiles lay years of trauma his mother had endured. Later, as an adult, William learned about a letter Diana wrote to her lawyer, Lord Mishcon, in October 1995. In it, she expressed her fear of being involved in a serious car accident. It should be noted that subsequent official investigations found no evidence of a conspiracy to murder Diana. But for William, the pain wasn't just about whether that fear would come true. The pain was that his mother had been so afraid that she had to write it down. She had to put her anxieties on paper and give them to a lawyer as if it were the only way to ensure that if something happened, at least someone would know how insecure she had felt. And then Diana did indeed die in a car accident in Paris. Afterward, William continued to witness the disappearance of his mother's traces from the royal residences. Photographs were moved. Personal belongings were packed up. Rooms once associated with her became silent. And the official portrait, the one that should have been displayed in a place of honor, lay in storage for years. Around the age of 16, William reportedly expressed anger at a close associate. He believed Diana had been isolated, losing her protection, and being pushed out of the very family she had entered as a young princess. In William's mind, his mother hadn't just died in a tunnel in Paris. She had been left alone long before that night. But William didn't rebel publicly. He didn't stand before the cameras to denounce Camilla. He didn't turn his grief into a media war. He still appeared at family events, still shook hands, still observed proper etiquette, and still stood beside those he might never have truly forgiven. That calmness led many to believe that William had accepted the past. But they were wrong. William hadn't forgotten the portrait in the shadows. He hadn't forgotten the empty space on the wall. And he hadn't forgotten the 15-year-old boy who had to walk behind his mother's coffin before the world without being allowed to cry like a normal child. He simply understood that acting too soon wouldn't change anything. So William waited. He learned how the royal family operated. He learned the precedence, procedures, authority, and boundaries that no one could cross without sufficient status. He transformed his anger into discipline and his pain into a plan that would last for decades. Harry chose to speak out. William chose to learn each rule of the institution until the day no one could use those very rules to stop him. You know, she wasn't the only one who waited in silence. If William's pain began the day he lost his mother, Princess Anne's wounds had been forming for decades before that, before Diana entered the royal family, and before Camilla became synonymous with Charles's marriage. The story goes back to before 1973. At that time, Princess Anne was said to have had a serious relationship with Andrew Parker Bowles. This wasn't described as a fleeting encounter or a baseless rumor. There was a close enough connection between them for the idea of marriage to be mentioned. But Andrew was Catholic, and Anne was the daughter of Queen Elizabeth II, a senior member of the royal family and closely tied to the Church of England. The rules of the institution made that path almost impossible. Anne recoiled, not because she lacked feelings, but throughout her life, Anne had always been taught that duty came before personal desire. Then, in 1973, Andrew Parker Bowles married Camilla. Anne is described as sitting in the church and watching the man she once loved exchange vows with another woman. She didn't get up and leave. She didn't create any scene. She didn't give the press a moment to exploit. She sat through the entire ceremony, maintaining the expression the royal family required, and then continued her life as if nothing had happened. But Anne was the kind of person who didn't forget. She didn't need anger to remember a wound. She simply kept it hidden intact and didn't let anyone know it was still there. Years later, Camilla appeared in another story, this time in the marriage of Prince Charles and Princess Diana. Anne witnessed Diana enter the royal family at a very young age. She witnessed the increasing pressure surrounding Diana, the crumbling marriage, and Camilla becoming an inseparable part of that breakdown. After Diana's death, Anne continued to see traces of her being moved from important spaces. A photograph was repositioned. A room was closed off. An item was put away in a box. And finally, Diana's official portrait disappeared into storage, leaving a void on the wall of honor that had stood for over 2 decades. Anne did not publicly protest. She did not make a statement. She did not wage war with Camilla. Anne's strength never lay in her speaking more than others. It lay in her ability to remain silent longer than anyone else without changing what she believed to be right. After her coronation in May 2023, Anne had a private confrontation with Camilla. The exact content of their conversation was never revealed, but the relationship between the two was described as so cold that no one in the palace could be mistaken. Anne never truly saw Camilla as someone of greater power than herself. Not because of the title, but because in Anne's eyes, power had to be built on duty, sacrifice, and loyalty to the institution, things she had accomplished throughout her life. Therefore, when William needed someone with enough standing to stand beside him, enough experience to understand every rule, and enough courage to not back down, before Camilla, there was only one choice: Princess Anne. William wanted to restore his mother's honor. Anne wanted to rectify a misstep she had witnessed for decades. 2 different wounds ultimately converged on the same goal: to bring Diana back to where she belonged. But William understood that mere desire wasn't enough. If he simply walked into the storage room, requested the portrait be brought out and hung on the wall, Camilla might object. An advisor might invoke procedure. A secretary might delay. And with just one request from someone influential enough, the painting could be relegated to obscurity before the public even knew it had ever been displayed. William couldn't let that happen, so he turned an emotional decision into an institutional campaign. For months, perhaps even years, William quietly reviewed every record relating to the Windsor exhibition area. He wanted to know exactly which portraits had been placed there, who had the authority to approve the changes, and what precedents had been used in previous arrangements. No detail was too small. Frame sizes were remeasured. The wall placement was confirmed. The preservation system was checked. Those in charge of the collection were asked to assess the condition of the portrait after more than 2 decades in storage. William also worked with people familiar with the palace's administrative procedures. He needed to ensure that the return of the painting could not be portrayed as a personal act of a son wanting to commemorate his mother. It had to be recorded as a decision that was within precedent, within the authority and function of the royal collection. That was the most important point of the entire plan. William didn't just want to hang the portrait. He wanted to eliminate every possible path to its removal. Every form had to be completed. Every signature had to appear in the right place. Every expert had to certify that the painting was fit for display. Every step had to be so legal that anyone who wanted to object would be forced to admit that they weren't objecting to the process, they were only objecting to Diana. And William knew very few people in the palace wanted to publicly take that position. The night before the plan was to be executed, he called Princess Anne. The call was brief. There was no need for lengthy explanations between them, for Anne had understood the meaning of the blank wall years earlier. She said it was too late. Diana had waited too long, and she deserved to return home. William simply replied that she would return the next day. Then the call ended. No good wishes, no speeches, no emotions expressed in words. Only a cold agreement between two people who had waited long enough. The following morning, Camilla's schedule took her to an event outside London. On paper, it was a normal royal engagement, but the timing was too perfect to be considered a coincidence. Camilla needed to leave Windsor before the painting was taken out of storage. She needed to be far enough away so she couldn't show up unexpectedly, couldn't call staff, and couldn't stop the plan before it was completed. While Camilla's car drove away, a section of the exhibition area at Windsor was closed off. Only a very small group was allowed inside. These were the conservationists, collection managers, and a select few carefully chosen palace staff. They understood that what they were about to do was more than just move a painting. They were participating in a decision that could shift the balance of power within the family. No press releases were prepared. No photographers, no public schedule. No one was prepared to answer questions from the media. William didn't want to turn the moment into a performance. He wanted everything to be over before anyone had a chance to interfere. That had been his strategy from the start, to complete the matter in silence, so that by the time Camilla discovered it, the portrait was in place, the whole procedure was closed, and there was no way she could open a door to turn back. But Anne wasn't just there to observe. When the wrapping around the portrait was removed, she did something even William hadn't anticipated. That evening inside Windsor Castle, everything unfolded in near absolute silence. The portrait of Princess Diana was carried out of storage through an internal passageway, avoiding areas frequented by staff. The transporters walked slowly, carefully, securing each corner of the frame, as if they understood that what they were carrying was more than just a work of art. It was the memory of a woman who had been hurt. It was the image of a mother who would never return to this place. And it was a symbol of a void that had existed for far too long on the royal walls. Princess Anne was already there. Her presence was not required by any protocol. Conservation experts, collection managers, and palace staff could have easily completed the task themselves. The position had been measured. The suspension system had been checked. All the paperwork had been approved. Anne didn't need to be there, but she insisted on seeing it with her own eyes. Perhaps because she had seen too much of Diana's life changed in silence. She had witnessed picture frames being moved, rooms being closed off, and gaps in walls remaining year after year. This time, Anne didn't want to report the next morning. She wanted to stand in the room where the mistake was being corrected. The portrait was placed upright on a temporary stand. An employee approached, carefully removing the protective cloth. Parts of the frame gradually revealed themselves in the room's light. Then Diana's face appeared. For the first time in over 2 decades, the portrait was seen in its entirety within a space of honor at Windsor. No one spoke. Princess Anne stood just steps from the painting. Before her was not just the Diana the public had seen on magazine covers. This was the young woman who had entered this family with hope, become the mother of 2 princes, and then endured loneliness in an institution that always prioritized duty over emotion. Anne had witnessed almost the entire journey. The marriage, the tensions, the breakdown, the funeral, and more than 2 decades of silence afterward. The officials began moving the painting to its prepared position. Every centimeter on the wall was measured. The height was confirmed. The distance to the adjacent portraits was checked once more. No one wanted to make a mistake at this moment, because even a small error could be used by an opponent to demand a complete reconsideration of the decision. After nearly 90 minutes, the portrait was finally fixed in place. Diana was back on the wall. Her seat was right next to the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. Two women stood side by side in the same space, one who had reigned for decades, and one who had never had the chance to see the full extent of her influence on the world. When the work was finished, there was no applause, no congratulations, no prepared speeches. The entire room stood still, staring at the wall as if any sound could shatter the meaning of the moment. Then Princess Anne stepped closer. She gazed at the portrait for a long time. No one knew whether she was thinking of Diana in her early years, Diana in her most difficult days, or Diana from the last time they met. Then Anne spoke softly, almost to herself. "Diana belongs here. She always belonged here." It wasn't a request. That wasn't an explanation either. Anne didn't say it was time for Diana to be given a new position. She asserted that the position had always belonged to Diana, and that the past 25 years were merely a final rectified mistake. On the other side of London, Camilla had just returned from an event on her schedule. She entered the mansion, ending what she believed to be a perfectly normal day, and went to bed completely unaware of what had happened at Windsor. She didn't know the covering had been removed. She didn't know the painting had been hung. She didn't know Anne had stood before Diana's face and spoken those words. While Camilla slept elsewhere, Diana was back on the wall. And the next morning, the entire palace would face the consequences. When Queen Camilla returned to Windsor, she believed it would be just another ordinary workday, like hundreds of days before. The car stopped at the familiar entrance. The schedule was still packed with meetings. The staff were still in their positions. There was no warning that in just a few minutes, a change that had lasted for more than 25 years would unfold before her eyes. Then Camilla entered the great hall. She saw the portrait. In that moment, time seemed to stop. Where there had been an empty space for years now stood the face of Princess Diana, placed right next to the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. Camilla stood frozen in the hallway. Not for a few seconds, but long enough for the staff present to realize that their fears had finally come true. The reaction was almost instantaneous. Camilla demanded that the portrait be taken down immediately. She demanded that a meeting with Prince William be arranged immediately. She demanded that King Charles III intervene. She wanted to know who had approved the removal of the painting from storage. And above all, she wanted a complete list of those involved in hanging the portrait. But each request received the same answer. No one had ordered the painting removed. No emergency meeting had been held. No staff member provided a list of those involved. No one revealed who had directly transported it, who was in charge of the technical aspects, or who was in the dark room the night before. That was what puzzled Camilla the most. For years, she had been accustomed to her requests being quickly fulfilled. No need to raise her voice. No need to repeat herself twice. But that morning, for the first time, the system seemed to be deviating from the way she knew it to be. The atmosphere in the palace remained normal. No one argued. No one reacted strongly. It was precisely this calmness that made things so tense. Camilla understood that this was no longer just a matter of a portrait. This was a sign that power was shifting. Unwilling to accept this, she immediately turned to King Charles III. In Camilla's mind, there was still one person who could reverse it all: Charles. For decades, Charles had stood by her side in the face of public opinion, the media, and numerous family disputes. He had defended his choices and accepted much criticism to keep Camilla by his side. Therefore, Camilla believed that if Charles simply picked up the phone, if an order was given, the portrait would disappear from the wall before the day was over. But what she expected didn't happen. Charles didn't call William. He didn't ask the collection managers to reconsider the decision. He didn't question Princess Anne. Neither did he instruct staff to prepare to take the painting down. He remained silent. It was a very brief silence, but also the heaviest silence in the entire story, because Camilla understood its meaning immediately. Charles's silence wasn't accidental. He made a choice. He chose to let the heir's decision stand. He chose not to interrupt a process that had already been completed. He chose institutional stability over a new family conflict. And above all, he chose not to continue defending Camilla at all costs as before. No formal statement was needed. No speech was needed. Simply by inaction, Charles allowed Diana's portrait to remain on the wall. Camilla seemed to realize then that she could no longer change this decision. She couldn't ask the staff. She couldn't rely on procedure. Neither could she rely on Charles. And just as she began to understand that the final door had closed, the door to the room opened again. The person who entered wasn't Prince William. Neither was King Charles, but Princess Anne. No one had anticipated this meeting, and what Anne said in the following seconds made the atmosphere in the room even quieter than Charles's silence. Princess Anne's entry was not part of Prince William's plan. William had orchestrated this entire operation to avoid a direct confrontation. He wanted the portrait to speak for itself. He wanted the process the precedent, and the placement on the wall to be the sole statement. No argument, no accusation, no creating a scene that could be twisted into a story of family conflict. But Anne had made a different decision on her own. She entered the room without a secretary, without documents, and without any introduction. She hadn't come to negotiate, nor to explain to Camilla why the portrait had been hung. Anne looked directly at her. In that moment between them lay over 50 years of unspoken history. It was Andrew Parker Bowles. It was the marriage of Charles and Diana. It was the closed rooms. These were photographs that had been moved from their places of honor, and a portrait that had lain in the shadows for over 2 decades. Anne didn't repeat any of that. She said only one short sentence. That's what Diana deserved. No threats. No anger displayed. Not another sound in the room. Anne didn't say Diana was being given a favor, nor did she say it was an act of royal kindness. She called it what Diana deserved, a debt that had existed for 25 years, a position that should never have been taken away. And now that debt had been repaid. Having said that, Anne turned and left the room. She didn't wait for Camilla's reply. She didn't look back at Charles, nor did she explain William's decision, because at that point there was nothing left to explain. The portrait had been hung properly. William had the authority to defend the decision. Anne had the standing to stand by him. Charles had chosen not to interfere, and the palace staff no longer automatically carried out Camilla's every request as before. Camilla couldn't argue legally because William had followed every rule. She couldn't rely on Charles because he had remained silent. Neither could she pressure the staff because the identities of those involved were protected. For the first time, she faced a final decision with no way to reverse it. But the story didn't end within that room. Information then began to leak. First news of Diana's portrait being returned to Windsor. Then Charles's silence. Finally, there's Anne's brief statement. What was initially envisioned as a swift internal change became symbolic of a larger power shift within the royal family. Following the narrative, Camilla's name began to disappear from some public schedules. There was no announcement of her removal, no statement from the palace. Only events where she was previously scheduled were now assigned to others. Meanwhile, Diana's name began to appear more frequently. The charitable activities she had been associated with were brought back into the official schedule. Caregiving support for people living with HIV/AIDS humanitarian work and programs for vulnerable communities were gradually revisited by Prince William and Princess Catherine. Catherine wasn't positioned to replace Diana. She was positioned as the one to continue the spirit Diana had brought to the royal family: closeness, compassion, and the ability to see those often overlooked by society. William, meanwhile, began to emerge as the center of a new order. Not because he had defeated Camilla in an argument, but because he had proven that he could use the institution itself to fix something it had allowed to happen. And at the end of the story, we return to the image of the 15-year-old boy following his mother's coffin through the streets of London. In 1997, William couldn't protect Diana. He couldn't prevent his parents' marriage from falling apart. He couldn't protect his mother from loneliness. And he couldn't prevent her from leaving this world. But the grown man did what the boy couldn't. He learned the rules. He waited long enough, he built up enough power, and finally brought his mother back to where she always belonged. Now Camilla has to walk past Diana's portrait in the very palace she once believed she had complete control over. She can't take it down. Charles won't help her. William won't back down. Anne won't apologize. And Diana continues to look down from the wall next to Queen Elizabeth II. Do you think William and Anne did the right thing by bringing Diana's portrait back to Windsor? Or will this decision deepen the rifts within the royal family? Leave your thoughts below and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story.